Hello, everybody. Welcome to Drunk with Questions. I'm Gooch.
And I'm Raj. Join us as we navigate the complexities of life. Here, alcohol may not be the answer, but it's sure as hell worth a shot.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Drunk with Questions, the talk show where ordinary people talk about extraordinary topics. With me today is the only guy I have a picture of sitting on the toilet. Raj, how you doing today?
I'm doing well. I let me explain that for a second, though. I still had my clothes on. This is just one of those random IKEA moments that
Is
happen.
that better or worse, though? My clothes were still on. I mean, come on, guys.
I mean, if I had tried, you know how those IKEA toilets have that little plastic on them. It would have been a messy situation if I tried anything there. No.
Didn't Steve-O do that in Jackass? Didn't he go
Oh
in,
God, I'm sure he did.
or
That guy.
one of the other guys?
You know how old these guys are still making Jackass?
I don't blame them.
They're gonna be
It
like
works.
70 years old doing this bullshit.
They got money.
Oh, okay.
They do.
Okay, yeah,
Look,
sure.
you see Steve-O's hot ass girlfriend, fiance, whatever she
What does
is?
that have to do with he's just broken though? Every bone in his body hurts.
He still
He's
snorts
got to go
hot
to
sauce.
he's got to go
There's
to higher
one bone that
climates.
probably still works.
Yeah, apparently,
Maybe.
according to his girlfriend, yeah, it does work.
He's probably infertile though with all the nut shots.
Oh, true.
Yeah, Steve-O actually got he was I think a coke addict or something like that. I
Hell
was
yeah.
watching something where he actually got clean from that. He's sober now.
It's a party
Yeah,
every day.
somehow. I mean, he's sober. We'll see how it ends up in the next 5 to 10 years. But today, guys, we wanted to have a Halloween / spooky season themed kind of meet and greet where no real topic for us to talk about. We just wanted to get together and just have a conversation, talk about different things. We'll talk about video games, scary movies, Halloween, all kinds of stuff. So I hope you guys enjoy this episode. We're just want to have actual just random conversation.
Yeah, and I guess we can preface this conversation with the fact that this is going to be our last episode of season 1. Now, we're going to take that time over the holidays here to record some backlog stuff, figure out where we want the podcast to go. Just kind of get all of our ducks in a row for season 2. But we're not going to leave you for, I think it's like 9 weeks without anything. So we decided that we will be doing a holiday special at some point between Thanksgiving and Christmas. And the plan is to pick back up with season 2 the second week of January.
So it's going to be a bit of a break, but I hope you guys take the time to spend time with your families. We all have families we want to spend time with during that week, and we don't want to put all of our focus into doing this. And we wanted to take a break. It's been 15 episodes now.
It's a lot of content.
Season 1. Yeah, it's a lot of content and a lot of
30 hours of content.
Yeah, and we appreciate every single person that's listened to it, and we appreciate every single person that's taken the time. We even had a gentleman reach out to us via email to help us with an inaccuracy we had last episode, and we appreciate that. We wanted to just thank you guys once again for everything that you guys have done for us in this first season and these 15 episodes. So I hope you guys enjoy our banter as we talk about random stuff. One of the first things I think we should go ahead and talk about, what's the scariest dream that you guys have had?
Oh man, I got this on lock, bro. All right. When I was a kid, I still remember this dream to this day. That's how scary it was. Well, okay, there's 2 dreams from when I was a kid. The first one was I woke up in a swimming pool, but the walls were really, really high and it was empty. And all around me were pufferfish. Not even joking. And I still remember this because when I was a kid, I thought pufferfish were poisonous, right? So I'm seeing like exaggerated spines in a pool that I can't get out of, and like I couldn't take a step. I remember that religiously. The other one was I was a kid and I had a dream. Now maybe this was right around Halloween but I believe I was trick or treating, and like I went up to a house, and the people in the house were velociraptors, and then they started trying to chase me. So,
Ellen, Ellen.
Alan.
All right, Spicy, your turn. What was your scariest dream?
That's a hard one, man. I can't really remember like a distinct, like scariest dream, like individually. I would say the biggest thing is like, so when I was a kid, I actually had quite a few nightmares as a child. Um, the biggest theme for me, that always freaked me out the most, it was when something was going wrong and I was trying to say something, but I couldn't say anything. So like that was like the most terrifying like part of the nightmares.
It's like
Uh, it,
locked in syndrome, right? Where you're thinking, but you can't say anything. Like,
it's something like, yeah, like no matter what it was, like what I was facing or like the stuff going on around me, like trying to say something and then basically not being able to say anything.
yeah, that sounds pretty terrible.
Yeah.
What about you, Tim? What is your biggest nightmare?
I know it was one that was recurring again, like when I was a kid. Um, they're like they're pretty big backyard growing up, and there's like a woods line at the back of it, and then good chunk of woods behind, and like I had these dreams that I was just like outside playing, and then wolves came out of the woods and started like chasing me, and then started running away. Like you can't yell, you can't scream, nothing. And then like the Rock and the Lion King, Pride
Yeah.
Rock, right?
Yep.
Where you like go up to it and it's just an end. Like it was me like continuously running, like trying to get back to the house, but it was going up like this rock that just stopped as the wolves were chasing me, and then I pretty much would wake up after
Oh,
that.
so you were just being hunted in your dreams nonstop. We're
Yeah,
gonna
but
get
I
a
mean,
chart or something to get these analyzed because I
yeah,
feel like there's some deep rooted issues we are
but
dealing
like
with.
probably I don't know, maybe a few. I don't know how long ago it was, but I had dreams like at my house now that I was fighting bears that came into my fenced-in yard because I was angry that they came into my yard. So I went out and fist fought them.
You're very hopeful in your dreams, aren't you, Tim?
Man, I've
Hey, I went
done
from running away from wolves to fist fighting bears. I feel like there's some progression there.
I've done like I've looked up dream analysis and stuff, man, and most people say dreams don't mean anything. It's just your mind firing blankly in a weird sense. Um, but I mean, I think your emotions have a lot to do with dreams, right? Like if you feel like you can't say anything, you probably are feeling trapped or stuck with something. Like maybe you got like a big project coming up where you have to talk, and although it's not you standing with like no pants on like the original joke dream that everyone talks about in the cartoons, it still has its connections, you know. Just
So,
like me with the puffer fish, like I couldn't go anywhere, I was stuck. So
so what do you think it's different for dreams versus nightmares, though? Because dreams
no,
are generally you're trying to recollect things that have happened throughout the day, and your brain is trying to form memories. And do you think nightmares are any different?
no. So here's one of the really weird things that I learned. Uh, so your brain can't make human faces. So any face that you see in a dream that you don't recognize, you've actually seen that face before. Whether it be like in passing, or maybe it was like a bank teller that you spoke to once, and like consciously you can't put a name to the face, but subconsciously you've seen that face before. Yeah, human brains cannot make human faces. It's freaking weird, man. But that goes along with that whole thing where we see faces in things that aren't faces, like rocks and like the burnt toast that has the uh,
This face,
Virgin Mary. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. That's the weird
Gotta
dichotomy of
love
the
Toast
human
Mary.
brain. Yeah, toast Mary. There's a huge dichotomy with how our brain works. It seems to be like one way, like we're really good at seeing faces in dark hallways, but for some reason we can't do it in our own dreams. I know one of the scariest dreams or nightmares that I used to have when I was younger is, it's apparently a well-known kind of nightmare where a lot of people also suffer from it. It's the peeking shadows. It's the one where you're laying down and you're looking at a doorway and a shadow keeps peeking over. You can't move, you can't do anything, and each time it peeks a little bit further and peeks further, and then it slowly just starts making its way to you. You can't shut your eyes, you can't get up, you can't yell. And I used to have this as a kid all the time because I lived in an old house. It was an old family house, and my grandma loved to tell me scary stories. And yeah, that was probably the scariest
Thanks,
thing.
Grandma.
That's only happened to me once, and that was probably like in middle school. It happened here in the United States, and I don't know if that was a night terror because
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. That sounds more like a night terror. Like you, you think you were dreaming, but I think you weren't actually dreaming. I think you were actually awake, paralyzed. Uh, my my fiance has those every once in a while. Not recently, but like in the past, she had a couple where she was like, "Did you know I was awake?" And I'm like, "No." And she's like, "Oh man." So they always talk about like their sleep demon. The that's the shadow that you're talking about. That's
yeah, this
I mean,
shadow had no distinguishable
yep.
features in terms of arms or legs. All I remember is red eyes and a mouth. That's all I can remember from that demon. And to this day, I have no idea if what that was exactly and why I was going after, because it didn't seem to be teaching me a lesson or anything. Like in Tim's case, it's just don't go into the woods with wolves and don't fist fight bears because you will lose. It's basically lessons you're learning from your dreams. Here, there's no lessons here. So
What I
didn't lose
find
against the Bears though.
win against the bears.
Yeah.
Your brain is setting up for failure, my guy.
I think what's weird though is that sometimes the fears that you have in your dreams aren't your actual fears. So like me, like I wouldn't say I'm terrified, but I'm a little freaked out by like heights, like way up there heights. And I'm a little jibbed out by like being in the woods in the dark. Like that's kind of creepy to me.
Like
Even though
after that weird howl.
oh fuck off. We'll talk about that in a second. But even though I hunt, I look for deer in the woods, stuff like that. Like, I'll still walk out in the dark, but it just kind of, I don't know, man. But I never have nightmares of that stuff. Like, I've never had a nightmare that I remember where I'm like running through the dark woods, or I'm stuck at the top of a tall building. But those are my actual fears. So that's kind of weird. I think nightmares are just your perception. I mean, and it always seems like a lot of nightmares are trapped, like you're trapped or you're being chased, right? And so we're perceiving those as nightmares when, I mean, fuck, dude, how many we might need to be careful with this one, but like how many good dreams have you had? You know what I mean? Like,
I wonder with these nightmares and stuff, right? Because we as a species don't really encounter danger on a day-to-day basis, right?
That
Like
ain't true.
No, we don't really.
Danger's different. If you look, dude, if you are either a hypochondriac or B, whatever the verbiage would be for someone that's really freaked out by accidents or things that could
Anxiety.
have. Yeah, anxious. There's got to be a term for people that are afraid that something bad, like the piano is going to fall from the top of the building accident. I'm sure there's a term for people like that. But if you really think about it, there's a lot of ways for us to be in danger every day. We just blindly ignore it. So when you
I don't think so. This society's developed to the point where we can go about our day without like other than you could get killed in a car accident any day of the week. That can happen, sure. But
dude,
we have more than enough safety.
A plane could crash on you. I mean, it's unlikely, but it's a possibility. It's always there, right? I mean,
let's just say maybe it's not that we're completely safe. Let's just say that we are as safe as we've ever been as a species.
I'd say that's kind of fair.
Yeah, I mean, when a species surrounds itself with more of its own kind, yeah, it's safer. That's why a
No,
majority
I mean,
of
like
herbivores.
we think about it as a let's just think about it, the United States versus a third world country. We have laws, we have systems in place to protect us, we have rules of the road, things that we do on a day-to-day basis that keep us safer compared to other countries, even if we're looking at that microcosm of it. Like, we can go to work, come back, and not worry about a revolution happening or or a warlord taking over where your house used to be, like any of that stuff, right? So, like, do you think nightmares play a part in kind of inducing some anxiety for you?
Oh no, I think nightmares are globally an issue. I'm sure whether you're in a tribe in Africa or you're the king of England or you're a first world citizen, middle class citizen, I think everyone has nightmares. I don't think there's any position or uh, financial status or anything that you can be in that would exempt you from having a nightmare.
I
What
would
I
say
will
I'm kind of,
say, oh, go ahead.
oh yeah, I'd say I totally agree with that. I mean, I think it's part of the human condition. There are certain, I'd say, factors that level the playing field for humankind, and there are certain things that just no matter, like you said, no matter your position, your gender, your age, like your status, socioeconomic wealth. There's nothing that can like eliminate all of these factors. There's always going to be certain constants that affect everybody at different rates, maybe, but in general, they affect everyone.
You don't think
So,
stress would play a part in how much you
well,
might not have a nightmares throughout the,
but
like?
stress is relative, Raj. That's what I'm getting at. So, if you lived in a tribe in Kenya, right? Yeah, you're not afraid of getting in a car accident tomorrow, but you're afraid of a snake slithering into your hut
Or a lion.
or a lion tomorrow. I mean, the stress it translates over. That is just as anxious and stressful as us worrying about our debt for them. You know what I mean? They don't have any debt to worry about unless, I mean, maybe
Well,
within the tribe, but you know what I mean. But like, we have money debt that we owe people that we never see, and that will stress us out. But for them, that stress would be what I explained: a snake, a lion, not eating tomorrow. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, it's different hierarchical needs that cause the
right.
level of stress. You know, they all cause different or sometimes similar levels of stress, but it's just based on where your prioritization is of those needs in your life. You know, like you said, if somebody doesn't know what riding in a car is like, you know, they don't fear car accidents because they don't have that base knowledge. But the stresses, like you mentioned, of things that do affect them in their circle are will stress them out. And I think stress obviously is well documented as like a health condition now, as like the silent killer, you know, and the I think definitely it will play into people having nightmares based on like not only the level of stress that you experience relative to your coping mechanisms. You know, some people have really good coping mechanisms that are able to decompress and de-stress enough to where they can sleep peacefully, but there's some people that internalize it or don't have those coping skills that probably just their stress just seeps into every level of their being, and like their nightmares, like they can't escape it.
So, speaking of stress and the human condition, um, what is your guys' biggest fear? What is something that will keep you up at night if something triggers inside of you?
Democrats.
Tim, you're
And
excluded
here it
from this
is.
conversation. Feel free to leave.
I couldn't help myself.
Tim is afraid of Democrats. His dreams
Okay.
are fist fighting Democratic bears in his backyards.
Well, now that we've flipped that tinfoil hat, uh, I know for me personally, my biggest fear out of anything is not living up to my full potential. And I think that's common for a lot of people. Um, some people, you know, and that's not to say that one fear is bigger than another. Fears are different for everybody. Um, you know, some people, it's my biggest fear is not reaching this level of monetary wealth. Some people, my biggest fear is not having children. Obviously one of my goals is to eventually get married, have children of my own. But the biggest thing is like with the like school was always pretty easy for me. Learning, like that's just one of my skills. So and with the talks you have with your parents and the people that are like mentors in your life and they try to invest into you, my biggest fear probably is not calling in a good return on that investment.
Okay, so it's basically not living up to your full potential and feeling like you wasted a part of what you were trying to do.
Yeah, I mean, I've had some regrets in life of like things that I've done or haven't done. But then like obviously I'm still young. I'm not even 30 yet. Like I'm 29. So there's plenty of life ahead of me, but I don't want to get to the end of that life and feel like I squandered the opportunities that I was given.
Okay, I understand. That's a lot of people go through those type of fears where they're feeling like they might not be meeting their own internal expectations and also like familial or societal expectations for themselves. So
Yeah, I think the biggest fear is living with regret of in general of like my life is not what it should have been and now I can't do anything to fix it.
okay, what about you, Gooch?
Oh man, that's a tough question because like I agree with what Spicer's saying, but I think it goes more into like maybe not being like a disappointment. I don't know. That's a tough question, man.
Hey, this is an open space, man. It's just us and whoever's listening.
No, I know. It's hard to answer it straightforward, I guess. Yeah, like I don't know.
I
Just
think I
don't want to
get what
be
you're
a
kind of saying.
yeah, like you don't want to be a disappointment or you don't want to be disappointed maybe. I mean, we all have people in our lives that we look up to or maybe we feel like they look up to us and maybe that's where that fear actually it's not that it changes, it just has a different meaning. So you could be like, I don't want to be a disappointment. So when you're growing up, you don't want to disappoint your parents. You want to do well. You want your family to be like, wow, that person's got a lot going for them. And then as you get older, maybe people start looking up to you, and you're like, well, I don't want to disappoint the people that look up to me now. You know?
No,
Well, and
I
I
can
think
understand that.
I think I get it. It like playing into kind of what I was saying. I think it's like you don't want to that return on the investment, that investment that they've made, because relationships are just an investment in other people's lives. You can make a positive transaction or you can make a negative withdrawal. And that's the way I heard it explained years ago. Like every interaction with someone is a transaction. You're going to either leave something good in their life or you're going to take something away from them or you're going to impart something negative. So it's more of I think being diligent with like the what people have given to us so that we can pass it on in a meaningful way.
I think
No,
what hurts is I see people that, to me, embrace mediocrity, right? So, like, maybe something happened in their lives, whether you know what it is or not. But with Facebook now, we know what everyone who we've ever interacted with for more than 24 hours total is doing in their lives. And you see these people, and it looks like they're just embracing mediocrity. And I think what hurts me the most is I see them doing that, and although we don't know exactly what their happiness is, maybe you don't talk to them all the time, you see that they're embracing it. And in my head, I'm like, man, I wish I could do that. Like, I wish I was at a point in my life where I could just say, I'm happy, I'm good, working at the job that I'm at for the next 30 years, retiring, I could die happy. You know what I mean? Um, and so I think there's two types of people in the world. Well, there's probably three. there's settlers, there's reachers, and then there's evil people. And the evil people are like obviously the worst of our society. There's
The
settlers.
saboteurs.
Yeah, there's settlers that, maybe something happens in their lives and they say, "Oh, I'm going to put this on hold for X amount of years," and then they never achieve it. And then I think those are the people that do have deathbed regrets. And then I think there's reachers. I think the problem with reachers, though, is although they may not have deathbed regrets, I think they put themselves in early graves because they work really hard or are always striving for something more than what they have. And then that's just a life of disappointment. Back full circle. Yow.
Yeah, I mean, I get what you mean by that. Like in terms of, for me personally, it's respect plays a huge role in my own personal identity. Like I don't ever want to get to the point or be the person that people lose respect in, because everybody wants to be respected, just not as a, as an individual, as a colleague, as somebody who's doing their work. You want to be known as somebody who's respectful and is respected in your community. And losing that is probably one of the biggest fears for me, because especially like it's hard to earn respect back. You can save face and you can, do what you need to in that to kind of get rid of any of the ill things that you've done, but once you lose respect, it's hard for you to get that back. And that's probably my biggest fear. And I think it stems from the same thing that you guys were talking about in terms of, I don't want to be a reacher to the point where I'm screwing other people over to get to where I need to be, because then you're becoming a saboteur as well. But I don't want to settle either, because if I settle, it tends to be the same kind of issue where when people end up settling for something, they generally will just never try to reach for anything else. You might have the same job for the next 30 years. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're happy, doesn't necessarily mean anything other than you've got a steady income for the next 30 years. Are you okay with that? And for me personally, I want to be more on the reacher spectrum, but not to the point where I'm being a saboteur. And that's a tight line that you're trying to walk on. So that's probably my biggest fear, is just going either too far in one spectrum or the other.
I think one of the best ways to explain what we're trying to say for like viewers that may not necessarily get what we're saying. So like imagine, and I'm sure everyone knows, people that grew up in a very small town, right? And you graduate with 25 people. Yeah. Yeah, that's a small town. Maybe more, but so like you graduate with like 25 people. So you got the people that go to college, right? But then some of those people are going to end up coming back to their small town. You got the people that never go to college and they just stay in the small town. And then you have the handful of people that are from your small town that keep building themselves up and up and up and eventually get somewhere, God knows where, Um, I've never personally understood the people that could just stay in their small town. I understand having to go back. Things happen in life. I understand that. But when you're one of those people that stays in your small town, I've never been one of those people that I could be. I could find joy doing that. I mean, to me, it seems very. What's the word that I want to say? Repetitive. There's a better word for it, but you know what I mean. Like you just you're feeding into the cycle, and I don't know. I've just never been one of those people. I can't sit still for a long time. I can't do the same thing every day. Uh, you know, I couldn't go to like the same diner with a bunch of people right now. Maybe when I'm 80 I can, but right now I couldn't meet someone at a diner every Saturday and talk about
Well,
the
in
week.
in my experience with dealing with a whole lot of people, I mean, I'm in banking, so I deal with people in all different social statuses and social climates. When I'm dealing with that kind of situation, the one thing I've noticed most is that a lot of people that are in that position, that stayed in their hometown, they kind of made choices early on that kind of forced them to be that person. So that could be having kids too early before you had a chance to kind of spread your wings and see what the rest of the world has to offer, and then you have to put your kids ahead of you. That's just how it's going to work. When you have kids, they're your world and it's about them and not about you. So, and then there's people that, regret not doing as well in school and then end up having to work a job that's local, that they got hired in at 18 and they've been at that position for their whole life. And it's basically that's their job and that's what they've done. And there's nothing wrong with that type of work, but I have a personal feeling just after talking to these kind of people, it's that if they had a chance to do it over again, they would not be where they are. And that's the general consensus that I've had with a lot of these people. Not all of them wanted to go to college, but maybe they wanted to try something else. Maybe the person that worked at the factory for 40 years actually wanted to have his own electrician company. Maybe he wanted to have his own, completely different from what he's doing now. But I mean, you do 20 years in a company, and at that point, you're just working for a pension. And you'll just keep doing that job over and over again just because it pays the bills, is what you know. There's not much change to it. And they'll just stick to that. And that's a level of mundaneness that is terrifying to me.
Because you're basically the word I was looking for. Thank you.
Mundane, yeah. Because it's just Monday through Friday, same schedule, no matter what. Sure, you get your weekends, but most of the time, because your work is so mundane, your other parts of your life tend to be more mundane as well. So it's just like a repetition cycle where it's basically you're just doing the same thing over and over again. And that's terrifying to me. And I don't ever want to worry about that. Like, I want to be able to travel. I want to be able to see the world. I want to be able to do what I want to in my schedule. And then if I feel like moving up, I have the option to move up. That's just terrifying.
Well, and I think that I get where you're coming from with that, because I think the biggest thing for me was growing up like in a nice town, like it's a small town, but it's a bigger city. Like, it's not like, I'd say there's probably like 17,000 people. So, I mean, you've got in like the greater area. So it's a good size, good school district, all the amenities you need, like things, conveniences. I mean, I remember growing up, even through high school, being like, it's a great town to live in, go to school, raise a family. I'm like, I don't see myself ever leaving. And then it wasn't until I traveled overseas to Europe that you really truly start to see how big the world actually is and how little of it and how much of it is there is to see. Like, I had gone on vacations with my family growing up to different states in the United States, and so you get kind of an idea of there's a bigger world out there, but it's not really until you kind of like either see a majority of the United States or you start going to foreign countries and you really start grasping how big the world really is. And so I think that was a big thing for me, to where I still live in the town I grew up in. Like, I'm fine with it right now. But it is not a desire to stay here forever. Like, I have ideas of moving on to other areas or experiencing something in life in a different place. So, and I think that's a big part of it, was just seeing what there was to offer. Because the thing is, if you don't know what's on the outside, you can never want what you don't have or what you don't know about. So, and that's not to say that, people don't know that there's other countries or that there's other things out there, but until you really get a taste of it, like whether you like explore it through like a vlog series, or you go travel, or you like, it's different to see pictures in a video of something versus experiencing it in real life. And I know that may seem like pretty obvious to some people, but it really is a truly like changing experience. It kind of flips that switch in you to where you're like, something's different now. Some people may not have that, but I think it's a pretty common occurrence, at least at that point.
It definitely is, because the thing is, you can know about something, but until you experience it, you really don't know. And that's the biggest thing. Like, if you you might know about a country, but unless you travel there and experience the culture and experience what they are, you don't really know that country. And it can be the same thing. It doesn't have to be with travel. I mean, how many people want to try different jobs? During the COVID crisis, a lot of people quit their jobs and did something different. A lot of people.
I mean, it goes into the whole, like, when you go to college, like some people change their major all the time, or people through their 20s try different career fields of like, maybe I want to do something different outside of what I'm currently doing, or in a different realm of work. I think about it even now, and I'm like, am I really truly going to be happy doing this for the next 20 years? And unfortunately, in life, there's a lot of times that obviously there are sacrifices that need to be made. There, you can either be happy with your job, or you can have a job that maybe you're not entirely happy with, but it allows you a good living and to raise a family. Rarely do people get to find both, where they are truly happy with what they do, that also affords them that high end living that they're searching for as well. And so it's just kind of that, what sacrifices are you prepared to make for that, or what concessions are you ready to make in one area of your life to achieve more goals in another area of your life. And for our listeners, when we talk about things of like, just living in the same town for the rest of your life and going to breakfast with them, people into your 80s, when we say talk about that, make no mistake, we're not dissing that way of life, and that's a lot of how our parents and our grandparents grew up and everything like that. It's not to say that that is not a good way of living, because if that is what makes you happy, then that is entirely fine. We're just talking personally about our own fears and concerns in this world of like, we want to see some of our aspirations fulfilled, which mean that we have to branch out at this point.
No, that makes sense. Tim, you're awfully quiet. It's time for you to chime in.
Also, like,
he lives in Old Town, USA. That's
yeah.
why.
That's
Also,
right.
I like that aspect. Like, yeah, it's cool. Like watching videos. Like, really, like I think it'd be fun to visit Germany. There's a lot of history there. Like, I would think it'd be sweet to see the castles, like old school castles, right? In Ireland.
Tim.
No, but I'm talking because like
5,000.
Yeah, sus.
No, because history of the United States is really only 1600s, but looking at a castle that was like in the thousands and like seeing that part, because like Southern Europe, I'm like, like I think there's a lot cooler things in Northern Europe. But
don't you dare just
I'm gonna bring you to
besmirch
India.
Southern Europe.
I'm gonna bring you to India. We got stuff that's like 8,000 to 10,000 years old. It'd be fun for you to look at.
yeah, but like I'm sure it'd be cool to go there, but I have really like no real desire to, right? Like if I had the funds and was like, yeah, I'll go to Ireland. Like I would love to go to Ireland, right? But if I don't get there, then it does
like that.
No, not even you, but like if I don't get there, it doesn't matter to me, right? Like I'm not a huge fan of like photographs and everything. Like, yeah, I'd love to see like a bunch of national parks, but I know like having dementia and Alzheimer's in my family, the last thing for me personally, because living, and dealing with it firsthand, I don't want somebody when I inevitably probably hit that point at some point. Oh, do you remember this? No. And that's going to make me mad. Like if I don't have photos of it, I didn't remember it. So don't talk about it. So like, I'm content. I'm pretty like content with where I'm at some point. I'll hit a point in my life where I can go see more national parks and maybe get out a little more. But if I don't, I don't. Kind of wherever life takes me at that point. It's not like a deal breaker. Like, oh man, I'm going to be super disappointed when I die because I didn't go to Zion National Park. Right? Like,
you should be disappointed.
It'd be cool, but that's not like where I find a purpose. Like traveling for me, like I've moved out of state, I've lived out of state. It was okay. It's not, it's a definitely uncomfortable new environment, everything, but it's not necessarily where I felt like it was home.
Well,
that's kind of like,
I mean, traveling out of state is not really traveling anywhere that's a new culture, though. So have you traveled outside of the United States anywhere?
No, and I don't, like, honestly, I don't really have any desire to.
America.
Yeah, I mean, Canada would be kind of cool. Like, I'd love to hunt and fish in Canada, but let's be serious. Their government is a shithole, right? Canada is a beautiful country, but why would I go to some place that's run by shitty people, right? Like, I mean, the United States is run by a lot of shitty people. Thank God elections are coming up here pretty soon. But beyond that fact, like, yeah, I like Michigan. I like the changing of the seasons because as you're going through the changes, there's always new life that brings, spring, summer. I love it. Like I couldn't live in like Florida, right? I would go absolutely insane in Florida. I hate humidity. Like I can deal with it in Michigan because I know in a couple months it's going to be gone. I would hate the desert. Why? Because I would get sunburned the second I step out the door. California can fall off the world for all I care. Like there's just some place, like I would love to go to Alaska, right? So there's a lot of places I'd like to see within the United States itself.
Minimal sun, please.
Yeah, but I like seeing the Great Wall of China. Yeah, it'd be cool. And then I go there and be like, yeah, I saw the Great Wall of China. That's not going to be on my headstone or in my obituary, because really, like at the end of the day, who gives a shit, right? I mean, like, so that's kind of like my aspect on like traveling and staying home. Like, it doesn't, to me, it may matter. To somebody else, nobody cares. Cool, like you went over and did this. Good for you. Like, you want a cookie or a pat on the back? Nobody gives a fuck, right? I'm not looking for some Instagram story to make my life look like some glorified reality show when it's
No,
not.
I think that's the thing, that we're not talking about
It's
anything that we're trying to flaunt or show anybody else. It's a personal need, right? So when you're at your deathbed, and if you haven't traveled to some of the countries that you wanted to see, you're basically saying you wouldn't care.
yeah. Like I'd really not care. Like I guess like one of my biggest fears, because I enjoy reading into like global politics and seeing like social media, I think, is the downfall of humanity, but it's also given an interesting perspective in countries that have not fully blocked it, because our media is an absolute shithole with actually reporting real things that are going on in the world. They do as much censoring as other countries do. I mean, that's the pure fact. You can watch 8 different news channels and they're all saying the same exact thing almost verbatim with each other. So seeing the independent news stories, I'm like, oh, like that's kind of interesting. So I guess like one of my biggest fears to kind of get through that point. And now I kind of like mentioned to Mike a little bit ago, because I'd love to build a new computer, right? But if the shit hits the fan, that computer's not going to do me any good. So I went out and bought a rifle instead. So like a fear, I guess, and it's something that you just kind of have to deal with, is that I would hate to not be prepared for those types of scenarios, right?
I was going to say, if
Then
you don't say the downfall of humanity, Tim, you're a liar.
yeah, no, so
that's
like,
his number one priority.
yeah. So but it is like all this, being able to be prepared for situations down the road that could potentially happen. I mean, like, so I froze my 401k, right? Because I've lost 25% of what I've had in there. And they're like, oh, well, it's the long term, right? The money that I work for is going into some virtual account that's held by some billionaires somewhere off, in the greater picture of it. Somebody else is moving my money around trying to make my 401k pretty. But if the stock market crashed again, like in 2008, and then you lose everything, if your account drops down to zero, you can't gain from zero unless you're investing back into it, right? So I'd rather have something physical in my hand, actual physical gold, physical silver, ammunition, firearms, like real things that can be bartered and traded and sold off.
Tim, after this episode, we're gonna have a conversation about your fiscal policy. I've got some questions.
But to be fair though, the United States was much better off when our dollar was actually backed by something other than, like, oil is extremely manipulated. And that goes back to Rockefeller when it was like, oh, it's fossil fuels, right? Like, in the way that fossil fuels are created, if you're looking at a scientific thing, like, there will always be oil on Earth. At some points we'll probably be burning it off, but it's not like a finite resource that, oh, once you use it, it's all gone. Like, it's probably limited, but then why not use it? If we're here, why not use it? When I'm dead, it's no longer my problem.
Well, and I do like agree with the idea of like it is important to be prepared for scenarios. Like preparedness is, I mean, as I've gotten older, like I'm not only with things in my job, like now having to carry a firearm at work, I want to be as proficient as possible because my life, somebody else's life could rely on it. But also just having skills and a skill set and being prepared for different events is important. But where I kind of draw the line with it is I don't want everything I focus on to be about preparing for the what if could happen, like whether we think it may or may not. I want to make sure that the days that I'm living, that I'm getting the most out of it, so I can be satisfied when the when the good Lord punches my ticket and it's time to go.
Yeah, I mean, that's the biggest thing, right? You can be prepared all you want, but you don't want that preparation to overshadow anything else you want to do for the time being. And like in this instance, like you said, you wanted to build a computer, but for you, you felt better buying the rifle versus building that computer. So, I mean, did you really need that rifle, or did you already have enough beforehand and you just felt like purchasing another? Or
And
is
see
there
that
such a thing for you?
there's no such thing as like I can never have enough guns, right? That's not gonna be anything that's like I'll hit my limit on it. Like, yeah, I'm running out of space in my safe, so then I'll just buy another safe, kind of thing. So it's not like because I made a deal like when I first started purchasing firearms at 18, like I always buy myself a gun every year for my birthday. And it's just and it's usually like that gun that I don't have any like practical reason for. I just do it because it's cool. Like I think it's cool. And but like this gun that I bought is specifically for a hunting rifle because in the location that I live in, the rifles I have I couldn't use. So this is a smooth cartridge rifle where like the cartridge case doesn't neck down to a smaller bullet. So I justify that so that because why use a shotgun when I can use a rifle? Like, yeah, I have a shotgun, but I can use that for other purposes. So that's one of those things. And I mean, like my computer works, right? Like I don't have to replace it. I could still buy parts here and there. And it's like the rifle came on sale that day, and I was like, oh, I'm just gonna buy it. But I know like understanding the fact that trying to prepare for something that you can't prepare for is a snowball effect that just gets to nowhere. But really, like, I mean, we're talking about like being like the world is kind of safe for us right now and like the lineage of humanity, but really you're more likely to get into a car crash within I think it's like 10 miles of your home. So like there at some point, like my ticket's already been half punched a couple times. I came back from so at some point down the line, like I enjoy life. I'm happy with where I'm at. And for those unforeseeable stances that like shit happens, right? And it can happen at any time. Like, yeah, I could plan out my life until I'm, 75 or 100, and I'm going to do all these before I hit this year. If you get into a car crash and die tomorrow, right? Your plans didn't matter to you or anybody at that point. So that's kind of where, like, I don't know, I enjoy now with the job that I'm in, that's completely different from what I got my degree in, whether I wanted to be at that point in time career wise. I enjoy it. It's then like a 9 to 5, but it's kind of like that Monday through Friday. I don't work weekends, I don't work holidays. I can see my family more frequently, and that I enjoy much more than just kind of grinding away. Like, yeah, it's the rat race. We have to have a job, we have to have money so we can do all the other shit in life. So you have to have almost that mundane, but it's what you do outside that mundane for the individual that makes everything else worth it.
I shouldn't have to dread going to work though, man.
And
That's
that's
what I
where
hate.
yeah, so like my job, I don't dread going in there. Like I thoroughly enjoy what I do, and I took a substantial pay cut from what I was doing before. I'm getting paid less, but I enjoy what I do. That's through some of like the mentorship programs I did when I was younger. One, we went and sat in a courtroom and watched a trial for a little bit, and afterwards the judge talked to us about kind of like how he got to his position, right? And he's like, I'll tell you what I make because it's public information. And so through there, he told us what he made, and we're like, oh, that's not a whole lot. He's like, yeah, it doesn't sound like that's not a whole lot. He's like, but it supports me, my wife, my children. He goes, but I love what I do. I mean, a judge would he was a family court judge, so he's dealing with all the really shitty family stuff. But he loved what he do. He thought that he was making a change and an impact. And he goes, if you find something and love what you do, it never feels like you have to go to work. Right? He still shows up to work every day because he loves it. He's making some type of impact and finding your reason, to, oh, I gotta go to work. Like, yeah, like work sucks. I think everybody would enjoy not having to work and just going on, but it's not the reality of it. So it's just, even if it's something that you thought you'd never do, if you enjoy it, why not take the chance?
And speaking of the fear that, I mean, we talked about the stock market and the value of the dollar and such, in terms of a lot of people have fear that the market's going to crash and everything that they have is going to be worth nothing, and they're going to walk away with nothing. And that's part of the reason people are investing in gold and silver and precious metals. I wanted to share a graph with you. This is something that I show to a lot of clients and some of my other friends as well when they talk about.
You muted yourself.
Can you guys see the screen? Okay, so if you notice here, this is the graph of market crash times, as well as the growth of the dollar and the US stock market's real peak values. So this is going from 1870 all the way up until 2020. This is the Great Depression, when everything dropped. It's gone up again. Then we had the 1970s crash with the oil crisis. Then we had the 2000s to 2014-ish. We had the dot-com bubble that burst, as well as the 2008 recession. This trend is just going up. Every single time we crash, we come back higher. And it's just been that we went through, this is probably the worst right here. This was the closest the US economy has come to collapse. And when you look at it and you see this trend, I mean, I think it's important that people are shown this kind of stuff where, yes, the market is volatile. Yes, the market does go up and down, but the overall trend since the beginning of the free market and purchasing of stock up until now has only gone up.
And so, like, I get it. Like, yeah, things have clearly changed and have gone up since 1870, but those people who wholeheartedly invested in their 401ks and then lost every single dollar in 2008 and had to start over again. Yeah. You're looking on the sunny side, like the grass is always greener. Like, oh yeah, you can invest again, but the reality, like some of those people lost their entire retirements and have to go back to work, and now you have 80-year-olds, greeting at Walmart.
Yes, sure, but here's the problem. What why a lot of those people that were getting ready for retirement lost all of their money is because they didn't go and talk to anybody about how they should be moving to treasuries instead of stocks at the end of the year. When you get close to retirement and most of your money is still tied up in stocks and not in treasuries, that's an issue for you to solve. And that's become more and more obvious in terms of us talking to our customers and us talking to people about this kind of situation. When you're in your 50s and 60s and you're still majority in the domestic market and foreign market, if a crash happens, yes, you're going to lose a lot of money. But there is not a single fiduciary financial accountant out there that would tell you to do that. And a lot of these people, yes, you can blame pension funds were robbed because a lot of people were in the housing markets. That happened. Yes, I'm not saying that it didn't, but a lot of it also had to do with the fact that people weren't ready for anything like this. Everyone saw the real estate market go up. Nobody predicted that it would fall down, and nobody took any fallback. And a lot of people that lost money up here were also a lot of billionaires and millionaires, not just poor people. A lot of people lost houses. That was the biggest hit during this time. It wasn't the loss of financial 401k that they had a problem with. A lot of people lost their 401k and then also lost their house because they were doing adjustable rate mortgages, buying 5 and 6 properties at a time. And that's going to cause a problem. So you have to look at the trend. Yes, overall, if we're probably going to have another 2 to 3 recessions before we get ready for retirement. That's just the trend. It's just going to be the way it is. A market runs on a cycle, but you have to work with the long term, because guess what? We don't have pensions. This is it. It's this, or we put your money in a savings account and hope to get 2% interest rate while inflation beats you down at 4 to 5 on average.
That's why I bought physical gold and silver.
Physical gold and silver also fluctuates.
It does.
Yes, that market
But
also fluctuates. It also goes up and down based on how much is out there. So it's not guaranteed, just like it is. And then good luck taking your gold and buying something with it. You still have to convert it into US dollars and then
oh
buy
yeah,
something with it.
yeah, that's. I don't know. I'd still rather have something physical than something virtual. Right? Like
Absolutely.
I know the money in my savings account, my bank account, since the Feds kind of fucked us over on that one again. Yeah, I'd rather hold something and be like, I can still sell this to someone, rather than, oh, I invested X amount of money in the stock market. Cool, I have a net value or a gross value, whatever, of that amount. Then what? Then it's just like I can't draw from that if I needed like a home repair. I can't pull money out of my 401k and fix my house. I can sell gold and silver or other physical things to do those types of, big expenditures.
No, you can. 401ks have that ability. It's called a 401k loan.
And then you get
401ks have that ability.
taxed
No,
on it.
nope. 401k loans you pay no tax on. 401k loans are a draft from the person that holds your 401k. You pay the 401k back in terms of payments into the same 401k you pulled off from. There is barely any interest. I think it's like 2 to 3 interest, and even that interest is most of the time given back into your 401k as additional deposits because these companies want you to invest more. So this is not a case where you can't draw. Let's take a look at this chart here for the price of gold. You bought gold in 2013 at $1,700. You had home repairs that you needed to do in 2016 or 2016, and you sell that gold to do your home repair. All the gold has gone down in value by $600 per. How is that any different than you going to the stock market, buying a stock, and then when you need to cash that stock out to do something, you've already lost money and you have to keep it for the long term. You have to wait another 7 years before gold goes up to the same value that it was.
Yeah.
There's no difference, right?
Other than like physically obtaining something, right? I would never buy a stock in gold. Like that'd just be like, to me, that would be asinine. Why would I buy a stock in it when I can buy a physical product?
Yeah, right? That's what I'm saying. You can have that physical product, but the value of it changes just like anything else.
Oh yeah, which is understandable. Same thing like ammunition, right? Every time a Democrat gets put in office, ammunition doubles or triples in price because they're saying, oh, we're going to ban guns, we're going to do all this other bullshit to strip you of your rights. And then eventually, as they figure out that they can't quite do that, then the price slowly, comes back down. And
yeah, I mean that's market. Yeah. We have a free market, and this is the side effect of a free market. Unfortunately, it's going to be ups and downs. Now, I mean, when you talk to a person that's in their say that you're a 20-year-old, you just turned 20, you just turned 21, you go into the market and you start investing 10% of whatever you're making every year for the next 50 years. And then let's say somebody starts when they're 30. What do you think the difference in what they end up having is?
Oh, I know it's pretty significant. Like I did Dave Ramsey class in high school, but that's if you do everything right, don't have debt, don't have all this other stuff. If you're able to contribute the maximum amount, get the company, contribute the maximum amount or more from your company match and all this other stuff.
Just 10% flat. 10% flat, you're making no more, no less than you were when you were 20 to the age you were 50. That's why they kept this math simple. To the point where if you were let's see, if you're 20, you made the same amount since you were 20 to the time you say that you were 20, you started at a factory, you're making the same amount that you were making in the factory as you are when you're 60 years old when you retire.
That'd be a shitty place to work.
Absolutely, but I'm sure there's some people have done that out there, but I mean, we're talking about a difference probably. I think the last time I looked at it, the person that's 20 years old walks away with $1.6 million. The person that started in the 30s walks away with like 900,000.
Yeah.
They're talking about like a Roth or something different.
Just a traditional.
An IRA.
A traditional 401k.
Oh, 401k.
Yep. And
That'd be
earning,
like if everything was going like pretty good.
sure. I mean, you're putting
Yeah,
10% of your 10% is pretty basic. We're not asking for 30%.
Who can afford like 10% is a pretty significant chunk with the price increases. Of
Not when it's
everything.
pre-tax. It's 10% pre-tax.
And let's say you make $40,000 a year, right? And then so you're putting $4,000 of that into a 401k. Yeah, it's pre-tax. And so what you take home is much smaller. So then you really have to determine, all right, what groceries can I buy? Gas jumps and 60 cents. And, that's.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm talking about in
Things-
terms of, so say that you have 40%, or 10% pre-tax per paycheck, it's nothing. When you look at per paycheck, what you're making less compared to what you're investing into the market. 40,000 divided by 52 weeks coming out pre-tax, it doesn't affect you as much as people think.
And like specifically for this year, it's like, yeah, so you're pulling out, so let's say, so is that 40,000 divided into 52 weeks, right? So you're doing 700, let's use like, we'll just round it up, $770 a week. Right?
What?
This is what you would be like your weekly take home.
If you're making what?
40,000 a year.
40,000?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's about right. 1,400.
And then so times that 10, right? So you're putting $77 every week into your account, right? I've lost 25% of my 401k. So for every $77 I put in, $19.25 of that disappears.
It disappears, but it also
every
comes back.
week. But if my 401k dropped to zero,
which
you
it
can't
won't.
come back from zero. There's no guarantee that it won't drop to zero.
No, that's how the 401k works, though. The only way it drops to zero is if you have a total market collapse. Everything shuts down. And I'm not talking about collapse. Every company, it's zero. Because the way a 401k works is that you have a diversified investment in about 100 to 150 different companies. So for your 401k to hit zero, all 150 top earners and top earning companies in the 401k bond that you have, or 401k stock that you have, would have to then hit zero. That would only happen if this country imploded. If this country went to absolute, it'd be anarchy in the streets, and that's never happened, as I've shown you in the chart. So for you to say that you could lose it all if it hits zero, but I mean, at that point, we have bigger problems to worry about. The country as we know it doesn't exist anymore.
Welcome to The Walking Dead.
Exactly.
So, I mean, if people out there are investing and people out there are worried about their 401k, as somebody that's in the finance department, I would tell you wholeheartedly, you're fine. We're all invested. We all have money in it, and we're all going to take hits now and then. Everyone is down 25%. It's not just you. You're not just, don't do risky stuff. All of your money in your 401k should be in a blended fund with a multitude of different companies that have 100 years plus of track record. So you'll be fine. Gold is great. Gold is great. Get it on the side, but you should also have a 401k.
And if you got questions about that pesky warrant, I'm your guy.
Yeah. Well, yeah, like I still have my 401k, right? Like I haven't touched it, but I'm also not contributing it to it because in the current market, like I would rather take the risk in buying some physical assets rather than investing it in a asset that's not backed by anything, right? Like even the money in my savings account, because I think it was during COVID, like banks, it's just a promise note. We'll promise to pay you this money, but we don't physically have all of your money here in the bank. Right? Because I think they used to have to hold 10% of accounts assets as like a physical asset, right? So if you had $100,000, the bank physically had to hold 10,000 of your assets, just easy numbers. And then they dropped it down to 0 for banks. So banks don't have to physically hold any of the money you have in there. It's just a promise note that they'll pay on it.
No, it's not that banks have to have 0% of it. Banks have to give that money to the Federal Reserve. The bank itself doesn't have it, but it has an account with the Federal Reserve for the amount.
Like the FDIC,
that's the insurance. That's not the actual. That covers you for 250,000 per person, but the bank still has to hold a certain amount of money for the individuals in case of a bank run, where people are going to the bank and grabbing cash. But there's also different variations in terms of, it depends on how much the bank is lending to. If the bank is heavy into lending, then it has to have more cash available to cover losses, and it's a percentage of whatever they're lending out. And that's all true. I'm not saying anything.
And I think that it just falls into clearly everybody knows I distrust the government, right? I think they're mishandling everything, but I also mistrust banks because banks are partially funded by governments, right? That's how it works, whether it's a World Bank or down to your credit union that's what do you call it, like their customers, whatever you call it, a customer to a credit union is, right? They're like, oh well, credit unions are owned by like the people that participate in the credit union, but they're still federally backed for it. So I'm like, that's kind of bullshit. That's just like saying, oh yeah, Facebook is an independent company that can make their own regulations on free speech, when in reality they're receiving funds from the federal government. So like, but
it's all going to be backed by the federal government, because there's always got to be a bigger person. People don't trust banks unless there's FDIC insurance. People don't trust products unless there's NCUA. That's the consensus.
Yeah.
So people want that FDIC on every desk and every teller window, because it gives them trust that they are secured up to $250,000 per person on the account. So yes, and there's also stipulations. When you put that $250,000 there, if you have $250,000 and the bank collapses, sure, they have 99 years to give you that $250,000. They'll give it to you in payments for 99 years. So there are things that are risky about everything that you do in the financial market. Guess what? There's risk in not participating as well. You want to buy a house? Good luck.
I hit
everything we do is a risk assessment. I mean,
it's all risk assessment.
All of life is a risk assessment.
That's like, for me, that's why I was like, oh yeah, like I'll buy things that I can sell, right? Because one big issue that I have is the credit card companies tracking firearm purchases and logging them in a separate manner than any other transaction, right? I think that's a gross violation, especially since they are receiving federal funding. You claim to be a private company, so you can determine who you do business with and what type of business you allow to come through your company, but you're receiving federal money. No, that's not okay. That's why I would rather pay cash for stuff, right? I don't use cryptocurrency. I have like none of these digital like Cash App or Venmo, just because I'm like, I know the IRS is probably going to listen to this one, but cash is king. Cash talks, right? You go buy a car, like if you want to use car, you have $10,000 in cash, $9,999. So there's no paper trail. And you're like, hey, I have this cash on the table. The car sales, or he's like, you talk them down. And they're like, if I pay cash, what can I do, right? Cash is reported, like tip money. That's cash. It's, I don't know. That's one of those
cash
things.
is king until you lose that cash. Cash is king until you get it stolen.
Yeah, that's why you carry a gun.
That's why, the gun is great. They'll just kill you and rob you afterwards. It doesn't give you any kind of protection. When you have an account with a bank and you deposit funds into that bank, if somebody tries to take money out of your account from that bank, and it goes through, the bank will most of the time, 99.9% of the time, cover it, unless you did something so terrible and so egregious in terms of your own security of your funds that they don't feel like covering it for you. So
I mean, my great grandparents lived through the Great Depression, right? they had money hidden all over their house. All over their house. They found an envelope of cash under the carpet. The carpet that had been there since, I think, 1950 and wasn't ripped up until after both of them died. And this was like large sums of cash, not just like $100 bill. And they had it hidden in books, like the pages of books, right? So, like going through it, like you literally had to open every book on the shelf. So like, yeah, cash, you don't have a physical security, but shoot, like my great grandma lived till she was 98, I think it was. Her cash never disappeared. Nobody even knew about it.
No, but her cash went out of circulation. The most of those bills would probably be a pain in the ass to get recirculated and have new bills sent out, especially if it's from the 50s. Also, what happens if the house burned down?
Yeah.
See,
that was the risk at that time, because they also didn't trust banks, because they lost everything because of the Great Depression.
Yeah, the Great Depression is the biggest.
Yeah, things still had value, but that doesn't mean that people lost. Yeah,
and that we learn from these. The economy learns from these things happening. Do you know why it's so hard to get a house now? Do you know why getting a house is now a 45 month to a 60 or 45 day to a 60-day process?
Oh yeah, because they used to hand houses out like no other.
Exactly. So we learn from our mistakes and we get better. Good luck. Good luck buying a house without showing me where the money came from, who has it, where did it transfer from. You can't even gift money to a house without having a paper trail that follows with it. There are things that we do on a day-to-day basis that increase security and increase the ability for us to be
decreases
safer.
Freedom.
You want increased security or decreased freedom? Your choice. And I promise you, most of the people will select security over losing some freedoms.
Thomas Jefferson would be so ashamed.
Hey, he doesn't live in 2022.
Increase in security means decrease in liberty.
Unfortunately, that's the write-off. That's how it's always going to work. You can't have one without the other. What do you guys think? I know Gooch and Spicy have been in the sidelines while it's the Raj and Tim show for a little bit.
I don't like talking about money. Stresses me out.
Yeah, that's the thing. Money is a big stressor. I know a lot of people that are listening to this show also.
I can feel my skin getting clammy when you guys were talking.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, this is something that I deal with on a day-to-day basis, right? I talk to hundreds of people every month about this very subject, about what I need to do. And none of this is me trying to sell anything. I don't need you to listen to what I'm trying to say. I don't need you to follow anything that I'm telling you to do. I'm just telling you from my 8+ years of banking experience and experience in the financial sector that there are things that Tim said that are valid, and there are things that you have to make decisions for yourself in terms of financial security versus freedoms and things that you want to do. So make the choice for yourself.
But call 1-800-GO-RAJ now, and we'll include a free gift basket with every purchase.
And yeah,
and don't forget, half of his family runs the IT center, so
shipping and handling not included.
And that's the thing. Like, I'm not a financial expert. Like, I'm doing what I think in my mind is right, because different things happen financially throughout life. You hit those ups and downs, and to be honest, like, I'm not a huge fan of people telling me what to do. So like, that's probably a big reason why I don't have a financial advisor, because he'd be like, you need to stop doing this and you need to do this. And I'll be like, I can do what I want to do.
You could suck a fart right out of my asshole, bud.
So I kind of want to move like my home business into my garage, but that means there's a little work. And I was like, oh, I'll put a wood burning stove out there. And I was talking to my brother, and he was like, well, will like your township let you do that? And I was like, well, I'll write it on a piece of paper that I can do it, and they can just kind of like figure it out. Like, that's not my problem.
Well, his garage is not attached to his home, everybody.
And while I respect
it's a physical structure.
While I respect man. Let me just put it this way: the firefighter in me is just fucking crying on the inside.
Like, oh, well, I'm gonna do it right. Like, I'm gonna put like intakes and like exhaust stack. Like, I'm not gonna put flammable stuff around this. You know,
said every person that had a house fire ever.
God, but burning stoves, man.
But look how long wood burning stoves were in use, and not everybody's house or like garage caught on fire.
My grandfather's house burned down from a wood burning stove.
Yeah, you know what the crazy thing is about all those people that used wood burning stoves back in the day, Tim? They're all dead now.
Can't tell you how many.
I mean,
By the way, to
Crazy
our listeners,
statistic.
by the way, that's a misleading statistic for those that are listening.
The charred
That
bodies
is.
of the innocent
Yeah.
are rolling in their grave.
But if
No,
you
on a-
maintain it, it's fine.
No, but on a
And
serious
it's
Not
note,
every
like
guy that had a house fire.
Yeah.
the idea that you don't like people telling people what to do, I get that. Like, obviously, we're independent individuals. We like to make our own decisions. However, I think there is wisdom in taking the advice of somebody that knows more about the area than I do. I don't profess to be an expert in all the areas. I try to do as much research as I can. Um, Sometimes it's more of I get that you're telling me that I need to do this, rather than be like, nah, I'm going to do it my way because you're telling me what to do. More of, I take it as okay, that's just kind of how you phrased it. You probably have a little more knowledge about this than I do. Not always. Some people are not always like going to lead you down the right direction just because it's an argument from authority fallacy sometimes, just because they have the proper enumerated degree at the end of their name or something like that, that obviously they're the expert on everything to be under that topic. That's not necessarily true. There are a lot of people that have doctorates in a subject that know not very not very much about what they're actually talking about sometimes, or because they have a certain title attached that they then profess to know about other things that maybe they do know about it, maybe they don't. But in the same token, like I said, I think it's definitely worth taking the advice of people that work in or have more experience in these areas.
I
Obviously,
think
you have
it's
to
a.
make the best decision for you.
Mhm. No, I think it's a failure of the person that is advising, because I think a lot of time when you go to advisors or people that have degrees and stuff, that expertise in a certain thing, most of the time they just tell you what to do. They don't explain why it's beneficial to you.
Yeah, and they
They
really
don't
need
take
to
the time.
break it down for the individual,
Mhm.
because that's not only going to help them buy into it, but also it kind of enriches that individual as well, because now you have some of that same knowledge that maybe you didn't have before that can then impart that into take it with you to maybe you can make a slightly better decision in the future on some of this without having to consult someone, or perhaps it's just another piece of knowledge that you didn't have before that can aid you sometime down the road, or even somebody that you know.
Yeah, which is like, I got a new primary care doctor, right? Because after all the
Gotta love that.
fun stuff that I went through, earlier in
Trying to
October.
die on us.
Yeah, so like my doctor, he's been a practicing physician for 30 years. He worked in ER for I think like 10 years or something as a attending physician, and he was like, I'm gonna be real with you. He's like, I'm gonna dumb this stuff down. I'm like, that's completely fine because I'm not a doctor, right? And I was telling him about like the hives and the allergic reaction. He was like, and I told him, I was like, I didn't want to call an ambulance, right? I've seen people come to the ER for stupid shit on the ambulance, and it just kind of hogs up resources. And he was like, to be real, he's like, you were on the top of that roller coaster about to come down. And he's like, and it wasn't going to be pretty. He's like, you probably should have called an ambulance for that.
Looked at your
I was
freaking
like,
chart, and he's like, "Oh, this dude was dead. Okay."
yeah,
So
and,
working in a
like,
hospital myself, for those that are on the opposite side of him, if you need to call an ambulance,
do it.
please call the ambulance.
Don't call it for like a splinter, but if you're having some serious issues,
When
like,
you're the person
you-
that is like fading consciously, like if you're fading in and out of consciousness, probably not the best idea to drive yourself to the ER 30 minutes.
Start feeling death's cold embrace. You see a grim reaper with his hood in his sight. It's time for you to call the ambulance. Okay.
Because then we got to show up with all the flashing red lights on the side of the road, and then we got to make this awkward trip.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. You have, as an expert, it's your job to advise people and also teach them. And that's a lot of the missing steps in when it comes to people like this. A loss, if you go to 3 or 10 people, 10 financial advisors, and 2 of them are terrible, you're going to lose trust in financial advisors, because then you're always going to be second guessing, which one is actually telling me the truth versus which one is just BSing me, right?
Well, it's the old adage of it takes so much to undo one negative impression rather than to build a good impression.
I just want to know why the 10th doctor didn't recommend the toothpaste.
He was paid by gingivitis. The gingivitis, the sugar company.
But yeah, I mean, like I'd say like with the conversation you guys were having about finances, like there's points on both sides. Like Raj obviously brings a level of experience to this, so dealing with this day in, day out, making this a career path for him. You know, there are everything's a risk assessment, whether it's 401ks diversifying and a variety of stocks, IRAs, Roth IRAs. Tim is not wrong in the sense that physical gold investment or like physical assets are not also a bad investment. Like everything has its risks and benefits. um I would say that it's probably not good to put full stock into one thing. Like that's even by one thing I mean, like, yes, I know a 401k is diversified amongst a lot of different assets, but the like there are a lot of people that get a 401k or a 403b deferred comp through their workplace. Some places have partial pensions still. I know that's kind of a dying art. And then a lot of people, like a goal of mine personally is not only to, I probably actually should up my 401k contributions. I don't think I've upped it to 10%. I think it's at the minimum 6 right now. But the something I'd like to do personally, and what I know a lot of people do, is they will start another type of retirement fund on the side if they work extra or they can contribute extra to it, like a Roth IRA. They will do that as well, and that's just another side of hedging your bets.
Oh, absolutely. That you have to do that. You're absolutely correct on that, because the thing is, a traditional IRA or 401k will help you, but it's also pre-taxed funds, right?
Yeah.
So it's always good to have a Roth IRA. For those that are listening, there's a traditional, which is going to be pre-tax, and Roth is going to be post-tax. So when you pull money out of a post-tax Roth IRA, you don't pay the tax penalty.
Correct.
So that's going to be like your best bet for, like, if you want to put that as your emergency savings, whatever you need. You're still going to pay a little bit of a penalty on it just because you're not over 59 and a half, unless you are. I mean, I don't know how old our listeners are, but in case you are, if you're under 59 and a half, you don't pay a penalty on it. Spicy's absolutely correct on this.
Well, and it's something that I've wanted to start for a long time that for some reason, so back to kind of the beginning of our talk, I have unfortunately in a good part of my 20s become very complacent in my life and letting life happen around me. And one of my goals is to start living a more intentional and diligent lifestyle, in not only in my personal health, but in like finances and other things. Like rather than like the carefree of let me go do what I want to do and hopefully everything works around me because I've got some of these things in place. There needs to be a lot more care, at least from me personally, into the attention that I give these areas in my life. And so the Roth is a perfect example. I should start one as soon as feasible. Like, and honestly, I may even try to create that as a primary contribution for retirement versus my 401k, but that's something I'll have to kind of sort out.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people that think that success is a luck-based thing. And what you'll notice a lot more as you grow up and grow older is that if you do the work to make yourself successful, the luck tends to be more in your favor. But you have to do the work.
Got to make the opportunities.
You have to do the work, and you cannot be complacent, especially in finances. How it works nowadays, we're already behind the 8 ball compared to people that were 40 years ago. We have less in terms of flexibility in what we can do. In the 70s, a guy working one person in a household working a 40-hour-a-week job could feed his entire family. It doesn't work anymore. We have to pay significantly more to get education. We have to pay more for a lot of stuff, and it's just going to be the trend. As the market grows, the dollar is going to be worth a little bit less every single time. It's still the gold standard, but we have to be on top of our finances for us to feel then be successful in other ventures as well.
So I would say that's a good segue. I'm gonna let Gooch chime in on the whole if there's a different topic that he wants to go with, but education I think is a solid one because I got a lot of opinions on the education system nowadays.
So do I, Spicy.
That might be a separate like whole talk show though.
Yeah, I think that should be a separate one.
Like that's gonna be a deep dive, man. Let me just put it this way: education
that's gonna be
a freaking racket, man.
That's season 2, episode 1.
Oh boy,
the collapse, the beginning of Dum Dum.
But
can we call the episode One Room Schoolhouse Rock?
So do you think the access that we have today to pretty much anything, like, the different search engines and the amount of information that we can get just from sitting on our couch has had an impact on intelligence, because we can just look it up instead of having to be able to like recall information.
No, recollection of information is not intelligence, and that's one of the problems with the education system.
Yeah, but I mean, even like, because when in elementary school, they're like, oh, you have to know how to do this math because you'll never carry a calculator with you.
Yeah, but when we were in elementary school, we didn't have calculators on our cell phones.
Yeah, well, because like cell phones were,
right.
I mean, shoot,
they were a thing. Don't say they weren't a thing, because they were.
No, they were, but they didn't have
but they
the
were
capabilities. Yeah, right. You could make calls on them, and they were not what they are today, clearly.
Yeah, but our teachers weren't wrong when they said that to us in elementary school.
No.
Middle school, it started getting to the point where it was like, all right, you're full of shit. You're just saying what you've always said. But elementary school, they were being honest. I mean, they didn't think that there'd be calculators on phones.
No, I mean, there's a certain level to what he's saying that's correct, that I feel like at this point, people won't even do simple multiplication without pulling their phone up. Right?
There's actually.
Yeah, that honestly, I see it on a day-to-day basis where it's just like they'll do something as simple as like 6 times 7, and they have to look up on a calculator to tell
but hold on.
Glue and put together, it's 42.
Okay,
hold on.
Oh, I'm serious. I'm serious. It's a problem.
I understand that, but listen to me. We as humans make mistakes. All right. So yes, it's simple, but we have something right here in our hands that can give us the correct answer, and we know that we won't be wrong.
And
that's one of the biggest issues. Is
could it be an anxiety-inducing situation that we don't have to know things specifically because we can always look it up, so we don't have to remember it, and then we'll start second guessing us until we can like confirm on like our
Here's
phones.
something.
All I can think about is how fucking bored people were 100 years ago.
But
like, what
were they bored?
No, because they didn't know. I get that, but oh my fucking god, bro. Like, I just watched All Quiet on the Western Front, the remake from Netflix, right? It's a German film, but they dubbed it. Dude, these dudes are just sitting in the trench. Sitting. Doing nothing. They're not doing anything. And I was like, bro, this is literally lambs to slaughter. You're just waiting to die. That's what you're doing.
Like, did I send you the video of the Amish guy that saw a trail camera?
Yeah.
Right? Like, the Amish, like, yeah, they know things exist. So they don't have access to it, but they're always doing something, right? They're always busy. They have something to work on, whether it's the farm, community, home things. Like I guess it's just depending on how you make yourself busy and occupy your time.
See, I think there's a fundamental difference in being able to pull up an answer on a calculator versus understanding the mechanics of how to get there. There's a fundamental way that your brain works on being able to solve a complex equation versus just having a computer do it.
And I think
you understand it in a way better than the computer can, because the computer doesn't care what the reasons or what it is. It just does it based on what the rules are.
Well, even like with the plasticity of our brain, right? That's a pretty big thing. So if we're not challenging those specific areas of our brain, other functions will start to take over those areas, because like you can literally train your brain to do things, and there are people who have like physical limitations, but they can train. Like, let's say you were blind, right? So your occipital lobe is not necessarily as like it's plastic, or doesn't have the plasticity of like your prefrontal cortex or different lobes within. Like, if you're deaf, you can have and use that portion of your brain to increase a function somewhere else. So not challenging ourselves in these areas, I think, is causing some type of mental decline as far as general intelligence or knowledge.
Okay, but how would I learn how successful guerrilla warfare tactics are implemented if I'm not watching my YouTube videos, Tim? Because I'm getting ready for the Civil War.
See, he's preparing.
Well, see, I'm doing research, man. I ain't just watching fucking you know, Logan Paul talk on his podcast about with hot porn chicks.
So if you didn't have that information that you could
I don't
Google,
know.
you would go to the library, right? Because like the art of war has been in libraries for quite a substantial time. So you'd actually have to go
Yes,
there,
but
learn the
okay.
Dewey Decimal System.
Tim, you don't even want to go
grab the
see the
book.
Great Wall of China.
Yeah, 'cause it's not
Here's the
important.
problem.
We could have had a Great Wall of America.
With literature, when they're trying to explain these battles, right? Like they have to paint a 20-page picture of like literally just what the battlefield looked like before they can even explain the tactics that were utilized. And you're reading one person's interpretation of assumably multiple different narratives, right? But when I watch this YouTube video, now what I can do is I can have the battle map on that thing with the little squares of the people moving around showing me what they were doing while the guy that's narrating is explaining the different narratives instead of jumping to his own conclusions. He can say that the general on Augustus Caesar's side said this happened, but the person on Hannibal's general, one of Hannibal's generals, said that this happened, and he can say historically it's more likely that this one is what actually happened. Everyone just makes their own fucking stories because they want to look better than everyone else.
No, here's I think where me and Tim diverge a little bit. I don't specifically believe the medium in which you get information matters. If you decide to go to the library and get your information through books, that's great. Like I spend a lot of time on YouTube looking at all different types of things in terms of like science, history, religion. I most of my time on YouTube, if you look at my history, is like all different types of like biographies or like documentaries based on random shit that's happening in the world.
That's what he
Dang,
wants
mine's
you to
episodes
think.
of cops.
No, but it doesn't matter how you get that information. I think it really matters what you're actually watching. How many kids nowadays care about history?
Zero.
Well, how many kids nowadays have the attention span beyond 5 seconds to actually sit down and like listen to Ken Burns talk about the Civil War for 12 hours?
Well, it depends on if they have the well, here's the thing. They grew up in a generation where everything is available on video.
I didn't even have the attention span for
Audiobooks.
that back in the day.
It's audiobooks. If they want to read a book, they're not reading an actual book. They're listening to audiobooks. Physical media is pretty much dead and gone by this point. They're going to be doing entire like libraries are going to be put inside of museums just so people can in the future can know what a library was. A library. But yeah,
see that
the medium doesn't matter.
That's a library.
Yeah, it's a media doesn't matter. I mean, you can watch it on YouTube, you can listen to a podcast, you can listen to whatever you want on here. But it's the topics and things that you could watch an entire video about quantum physics and understand more than trying to read a quantum physics book.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Generally, they will dumb it down to the point where the most basic of audiences can understand what quantum physics means. And I mean, you look like my sister's an example. So she's graduated in a degree in mathematics. She's doing her master's degree at Wayne State, and she's going for a master's degree now in mathematics and theoretical physics.
Why did you guys walk into the stereotypes?
I'm just telling you, she's ridiculously smart. Like I'm dumb compared to her. But so how it works in colleges, especially when you get into like the mathematics and the science fields, like you might be going into a degree that has nothing to do with mathematics and wondering, why did I have to take calculus? Why did I have to take Calc 2? Why did I have to take these classes that I'm not going to use in my work? The way those classes work is they teach you a way of problem solving and reasoning that's not always evident just when you look at just the problems itself. And if you can pass those classes, that means that you have acquired a basic level of reasoning and ability to do certain things within that class that actually will help you in terms of problem solving and reasoning in the future. That's how she explained it to me. And I think it makes a lot of sense because most of us will never use calculus unless you're going into theoretical physics or mathematics. But a lot of us had to take calculus in college as a math degree. And I think it's a great little barrier because it kind of helps you learn some of the reasoning skills that you might not have acquired otherwise.
I think your sister is a spokesperson for big education. That's what I think.
No, I agree with you though. Like the medium in which an educational process can be learned is not dependent. Like you can learn through books, or you can learn through watching videos, right? Like I would rather see someone do it and be able to work on something like hands-on instead of reading through
Oh
an
yeah.
instruction manual of like, all right, this is how I can fix this. And
This is how you
but
churn butter.
yeah, like because an instruction
Watch me
manual,
twist this bottle cap.
yeah. But like, like that's just how I learn. And people have different learning styles, but also you can go back into like intelligence testings, right? Like what determines a specific intelligence. So we have these somewhat like baselines, but like World War II, they would pretty much like the early version of the ASVAB test for military entrance. So you would go through, you would take this test, it would tell you like your IQ level. Okay, a kid who grew up on a farm is of course going to have a smaller or like a lower IQ than a kid who grew up in a upper class educated family. But it doesn't mean that the upper class kid is smarter than the farmer. That farmer could disassemble an engine in a day and rebuild it, and that upperclassman kid couldn't, right? So like I guess as far as intelligence, especially at that time, really varied so drastically depending on the environment that you were put into.
Well, the IQ test is a flawed system to begin with,
Oh yeah.
because it's not really testing the smartness of a person, as I say smartness, the intelligence of a person.
The smartness.
It's not testing the intelligence of the human as much as it is just like very specific problem solving skills, which may come into play when you're older. As you get older, you get better at reasoning. It's just part of our development, especially as males. We don't really develop fully until we're 25. Um, but like a more important segment that's come into play recently is something called EQ, which is more of emotional intelligence testing. So emotional intelligence testing is how you are able to recognize. It's almost like people reading, right? How can you connect with another human being nowadays? More in terms of a company setting with so many people working together, there's a higher emphasis on EQ over IQ. So they want to know if you can actually relate to other human beings and work well with other people versus whether or not you can solve an IQ test.
Well, I think that's important. I mean, to go off of what Tim said, I think it's important to know that with the ASVAB, what you were talking about, that it's important to know that that's why that is not actually an IQ test. They weren't measuring IQ with the ASVAB. It's an aptitude test.
No, yeah, that's at the time for military entrance in like World War I, World War II, it was like specifically more geared towards an IQ test because they wanted like this is going to sound bad, right? But they had certain tasks that they determined were below the functionings of like primates like monkeys.
Yeah.
You were not allowed to have like any type of like even during the draft like nope, you are too like you're dumb below our lowest amount. So like I don't remember what the level was, but like um so a lot of those farmers ended up being like the mechanics or infantrymen, a lot of
You're
those smarter
shoveling poop
guys.
monkeys.
Yeah, but a lot of those smarter guys were more of in like the logistical processes and the leadership roles based upon their IQ levels because they're like, oh, well, you scored a higher level, so that means you're smarter. No, like there were always those jokes of like, oh, lieutenants can't read a map if it was in front of them, like they don't know where they are. It's like education doesn't necessarily determine intelligence.
Well, that's why they have different scoring realms now. With
Yeah.
as an aptitude test, you may be more mechanically inclined, you may be more science inclined, you may be like
Oh yeah, now it's
more.
yeah, I haven't taken the test, but I know it's actually like geared more towards specific like MOSs is where
Yeah,
you
they give you
score
a
on it.
scoring number,
Yeah.
which definitely has an overall of like getting into the branch, getting into the MLS or the job code that you want in the military. But kind of also to jump back to what you were talking about before, do we think that because of the access of information that people are overall smarter or is intelligence easier to gain today? Like I said, I do think so. Kind of what we're talking about. I do think the medium does matter because like you're gaining information any way you can, but like sometimes, like you said, you read a book and you kind of get the general concept of it, but then you see a physical representation of it and you're like, okay, it clicked, I finally get it, like I can visualize it, so now I fully understand what they were talking about. I wasn't thinking the same way that this is being pictured, because our imagination can only do so much, and it's a subjective creativity that we all have as individuals. But the and it doesn't matter obviously what you are consuming content wise. I think what Raj mentioned, what you're watching, what you're taking in, definitely is important. If you're just sitting there, like you said, watching a podcast of Logan Paul talk to somebody, versus what Raj is, watching, where it's like, science, history, all these other things. There's a certain amount of passive knowledge, I think, that's going to be gained from these things. But I would say, in my opinion, we are not smarter as a generation or as a society because of our access of information, for a couple of main reasons. One, we have had such an inundation of media and information and things, and like the studies that show that our pleasure receptors in our body are getting, essentially, to, don't get weird about this, but essentially it requires more stimulation to gain our interest. Like, we're becoming a desensitized society because of the level of stimulation that's being put out in media. Like, it sounds weird the way you're phrasing it like that, but thinking of it in a scientific term, like, there's more flashing lights in content, there's more like colorful marketing ads, like everything is built higher and higher to draw in the attention and to keep that attention. And so there's just essentially, if it's deemed boring, or there's not all of these flashy lights and colors and marketing schemes and everything that people are used to, people are going to pay less attention to the information. And so there's not a net positive gain just because they're watching content or because they're trying to get the information from something. There has to still be that purposeful, intentional listening to the information and that conscious effort to help try to retain some of this. And there are strategies for trying to retain information that people can use. Obviously, different things work for different people. But I think just because we have access to the information, we're not necessarily smarter as a net gain in society today, because there are still a lot of people that there's also a culture of, I'll be honest, it sounds kind of harsh sometimes, but laziness, or a non-desire to basically think that all of the media and information has to be presented to us because we're used to news feeds and everything just throwing headlines at us. The critical thinking and the delving into looking up the information for yourself and really trying to break down where these sources come from, where all this information is. There's a lot more of it on one hand, where people are trying to fact check things going on, but there's also less of it because they're like, I don't need to go dig for it. Everything I'm getting is true. All the information is already presented to me. Why do I have to put in the effort?
No, I mean that makes a lot of sense, because I mean, you can take as much media as you want into your brain. I don't like the idea that like the human brain has a finite amount of space to take in knowledge. I don't think that's true. I think if the human brain deems it necessary, it'll categorize stuff higher and keep other stuff lower. Like at work, I'm known as the walking encyclopedia because they'll just ask me random questions. And I've watched so many weird different things. Like I got asked, like I was just, I don't know if it's two people having a conversation. It's like, where did the word alien come from? And I'm just like, oh, I know this. Why do I know this? It comes from the Latin word alienus. It means to someone that is outside. I'm like,
let me break out my hidden Latin degree.
No, and like it's nothing that you might find, it might never become useful to you, but it's just random stuff that you learn about that has some value.
Like I'm the same way.
I could care less about what's happening in Celebrity Weekly. I could care less about certain things that are happening in the world. Like if I think it's important, I'll invest time into it. Like the Ukraine-Russia crisis, we spent a lot of time understanding it, things across. Other than that, like what am I going to waste my brain power for that for, right? So like I'll watch these videos, things that I'm interested in, different topics. Like recently I've gotten into guns and I've been watching videos and getting more accustomed to it and learning. Yeah, Second Amendment. I've been getting more and more into it. And I was watching a video or a movie or something where a guy was taking apart a gun and he's like, this is a very important part, and I'm like, that's not a part of a gun. I'm like, I've never seen that. That's a plastic toy.
Sir, I'm new to this, but I know that that's not real. You're muted.
You're muted.
So all right. So there's a ship full, it's like, let's say early 1900s type ship that they get into a severe storm and they get lodged in like a ice pack in Antarctica. And to survive, the ship captain kept feeding them penguins over a series of months.
Didn't we already do this episode?
But this is, just think about this, right? Okay, so they're surviving over however.
Is this the manatee one?
No, this is.
Oh God,
no. I think this is more of just like a thought process and to like see where your brain's at with it. Right. So they're eating penguins, right, for weeks or however long until they get rescued, find their way off, and his one of the guys that was on the ship, he starts talking about this. His wife was questioning, about this situation and like how he survived and everything. He's like, oh, well, penguins. And the captain kept feeding us penguins, and that's how we had food to survive. And she goes, oh, well, let's have penguin for dinner. Right. So they found penguin and they cooked it, and they were sitting down for dinner and they ate the penguin. She goes, wow, this is really good. Right?
Which is highly illegal, by the way.
Yeah. This is just like a thought thing. So she goes, this is really good.
Full Jeffrey Dahmer on us.
And he takes one bite of it, swallows, gets up from the table, and goes and ends himself.
Unalived himself, as the TikTokers would say.
Okay. So why did he end himself?
It's cannibalism. Duh, Tim. We're not fucking stupid asses up here.
Yeah.
I can read through your Jeffrey Dahmer fucking eyes.
There was just like
just made you a sandwich. You don't want it? Yeah. No.
So, but that goes also on the desensitizing, right? Because if we didn't already have these preconceived, or I guess like historical information, like everybody pretty much knows who Jeffrey Dahmer is. I mean, shoot, Netflix glorified him.
They did not glorify him. They told
like, whether or not, like, all right, so he did horrendous things, like, yeah, it's bad. It's the same thing with the news media playing and showing the faces of school shooters, right? It's essentially desensitizing. Like, no, these people should never see sunlight. Their name shouldn't be given out.
I could argue with you, though, and I'm sorry, I know you're trying to make a point, but it's not that it's desensitization. It's that, A, they're just trying to make a quick buck, but B, you can clout that with the fact that people knew that something was wrong, but they didn't do anything about it.
Yeah.
Right? Only a handful of people called on him, and the police were just like, oh, it's just a neighbor that hates him. And so that really makes you think now, like, hey, a lot of the times, if people think some shit's messed up, shit might be messed up. But anyways, finish your thought. I apologize.
Well, yeah, and it's a different type of desensitization I think you're talking about. And I'm glad you tied it in, because we went a hard left from what Rush and I were talking about with guns. I thought you burnt the hot pocket on top of your tinfoil hat for a second.
Oh, no, because like it has been shown that like showing school shooters will typically increase some type of person to go out and try and commit a more heinous act. Right, because they see, the unfortunate issue that some of these younger men typically are in, and then they see this happen, like, oh, I can do it better. I can get that glory. I can be on news and all this other issues. Like, yeah, clearly there's something mentally wrong there, but then seeing it every day, right? Like when war really started to be televised, I mean, there were photographs like in the Civil War. It was kind of fucked up because they would actually go and pose dead bodies, like Devil's Den. There's a very famous photograph of a soldier in Devil's Den, and he was actually posed. He didn't die in that spot. The photographer just thought it would be a good photo opportunity to sell to the papers. And so, like, yeah, that's kind of fucked up. But then once people started seeing like the realities of war, and they're like, man, this is horrendous. But if you play it over and over and over again, at some point you're just like, and it's just another day, right? I think it was Walter Cronkite, the end of his like broadcast, he would typically state like, and so many US soldiers have died in Vietnam today. And he did that every day. He was doing it more for a point, not necessarily to like desensitize people that was happening, but to recognize the horrific things that were occurring. But I don't know, like, yeah, if you keep repeating it over and over again, eventually you're just like, even in the workforce, right, working at the hospital and putting dead bodies, you know, assisting in the morgue. And I don't know if you guys are still doing that, but that was like,
thankfully now.
okay, yeah. So like when I got hired there, when I was working there, I was like, I have to do what? And then eventually it just came to, I'm just moving another dead body over, right? Like it sucks, but that's the reality of it, because you kind of have to lock that portion of your brain from thinking like this was a person.
Well, that's the thought that I just kind of stumbled upon. Like, I think the desensitization, I was getting added in a different direction. Like obviously this is obviously on the more the taboo, the things that we find, you know, disturbing, question our own mortality, all these different things, like desensitization and those kinds of aspects. Mine was more of just like the level of engagement required to gather information, but they're related in a way. And honestly, you kind of just stumbled onto something that I was just having a thought on. Desensitization in general is regarded typically as a negative thing. Like we don't want to be emotionless, shut off to the world. We don't want things that are supposed to be impactful no longer to impact us. However, desensitization is also it's a coping mechanism. It's a survival mechanism in a way, because I mean, especially like from my aspect in the first responder realm, there are a lot of things that you end up seeing or dealing with that you don't have the luxury of processing at the time, or you don't your body doesn't want to process it, or it's something that your mind was never really designed to have to experience, but unfortunately because of life and circumstances you're being put in that position. And so the desensitization of it, of like basically being temporarily, I should say, hopefully temporarily, emotionless or unavailable to a certain topic, purely so that you can accomplish a goal or you can make it out of a situation intact, then you later have the luxury of breaking it down and de-stressing and decompressing and processing the mental impact that it had. Because I think that's also something that's obviously we've talked about it in different classes and everything, but that's something that's been lacking in the first responder realm for a long time. The old adage of deal with it, lock it up, and never talk about it again. That has caused so much strife and turmoil in the fire, EMS, police, law enforcement, military communities. Like you can't, it's essentially just like we know, like we talked about earlier, I mentioned stress is that silent killer. We know it's a medical condition now, like compiling stress on people. And if you lock up all that stuff, you're just building a stress level higher and higher and higher. And eventually there's a capacity where it can't take any more of it. And that's unfortunately how we get into some of these really tragic situations. Um, and so it's, that's kind of my soapbox, is that we don't really have the luxury anymore in those types of career fields to not talk about it and not deal with those emotions and situations and the psychological impacts that they have on people. Um, because you can only be desensitized to a point. Something is eventually going to affect you, or over time it's going to affect you until it finally has to have some kind of escape route.
Tim and I have already had that moment, and we had it together. We won't go into it, but
Yeah,
I know.
Well, that's like,
that's fair.
But I mean, that's like the same thing, like, right? Because I mean, I learned that Raj also worked in a mental health institution, right? But people who haven't experienced those types of things, and like when I got hired at the hospital, I never would have expected to have those experiences that I did. I thought it was going to be like a TSA thing, right? Nobody's bringing weapons into the ER. You run it through an X-ray thing, yeah, they're good. Like I didn't realize all the shit that actually goes on. Like, yeah, you can get injured pretty significantly. There's all sorts of stuff that I was very naive to and then quickly learned. But at the same time, it's hard like that's where I think first responders with psychological issues are getting better in the fact that there are first responders who are getting their appropriate degrees to help those who do have issues. Like I can't think of the name. It was at a conference that I went to. Because if you're a first responder and you're having some issues that you want to talk to, and you go and talk to some shrink that doesn't know anything outside of the book that they learned from, never really experienced like those types of situations, it's hard to talk to them. I even talking to people like coworkers at my job now, if I share a story and I'm like kind of laughing about it, and they're like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Like, but I was like, oh yeah, like I guess because they didn't have that type of experience to learn how to cope with those types of things in a manner that you can just process through your brain without going down a dark hole.
No, and that comes with
So it's
experience for a lot of us, is that we've dealt with some of those situations. And I know for a fact that, when I worked in a traumatic brain injury center, it was the thing about traumatic brain injury, it doesn't just make someone different than it makes them unpredictable. And that unpredictability is what really keeps you on edge. Like, I used to walk in on people sleeping. They were supposed to be watching these patients as they sleep, and they're sleeping themselves. And I had to take a moment, and some of them I had to take aside because I was in charge of that floor for a little bit, and kind of had to tell them, hey, this guy wakes up and he's in a bad mood. He could just hurt you.
But you
That's
can end
it.
up dead that way.
Yeah. I've had patients take forks and snap the fork part off, turn it into a sharp object. We have to do checks all the time to make sure they didn't have anything sharp. If he hurts himself, not only are you fired, the family's going to sue you. If he hurts you, then you got to live with the repercussions of that. And it's just that constant edge. And I mean, we had people that were, unable to walk or move around, and they were less threatening because they basically need help with everything. But we also had people that were like young people with car accident injuries that had traumatic brain injuries, and they're just as strong as normal people, if not stronger. Because once that switch flips, they get this adrenaline rush and the strength that is almost unbelievable. And they can take on 2-3 people at a time if they want to. And if you're in a room by yourself and you get cornered, you're gonna have to start fighting for your life. And that's part of the job, unfortunately. And I think some people thought it was just a babysitting gig. And
Yeah, never did I think that me and like 3 other coworkers would almost be stabbed by ballpoint pens in one interaction.
it's just part of the gig. And I commend the people that have done it long term, and I commend the people that have had to do it, for long periods of time and have survived it. Because I did it for 2.5-3 years, and man, that stress, the feeling of the last day when I walked out that door and I didn't have to worry about it, is something I couldn't even describe. It was like, oh my God, I don't ever have to come back here and be stressed for a 16-hour shift anymore.
Well, a perfect example was a guy that used to work with us. He retired from the Michigan Department of Corrections after 30 years. So he did a full retirement rotation out of the prison system. And he's like, I kid you not, the day that I left, my final day, it was like a weight, like it's the cliche, like it's like a weight lifted off their shoulders, like the dark cloud removed over top of them. He's like, but it's true. He's like, I can't even tell you. He's like, the biggest thing that he said was, he's like, it is like I finally got out of prison, because the people that work in that environment truly are basically in prison. Like, they have more freedoms obviously than the prisoners that are there, and they get to go home at the end of the day and have days off. But obviously in our state, MDOC, they have a lot of staffing issues currently. It's been going on for a long time, a lot of mandatory overtimes. And when you're working in that environment for an 8 to 12 hour shift, or you're getting mandated for a 16, that's a good portion of your day that you're spending inside of a prison with prisoners. So it is hard not to feel after that career that you were in prison for part of your life. And so that is a thankless side of law enforcement that I think gets very little credit. Not just them, but county jails as well. You're working in a lockdown setting, like, and really, like, there's a lot of mentally that goes into that I think is underplayed. And so hats off to those people. It's a necessary job that needs to be done, and I would not want to do it myself.
And anybody that's listening out there that is in a position where they're so stressed at work that it's taken a toll on their life, unless you fully love what you're doing and it's just that stress is part of what you have to deal with the work that you do, there are options out there for you. You do not need to kill yourself in a job that you're not happy with just for the stress that you're dealing with. Look around, find a different job, try something new. Just
Yeah, it's
don't
not
burn
worth it.
yourself over it. It's not worth it.
The best time to look for a job is when you have one. So
that's completely true.
That is entirely true.
If you walk off the job or get fired because you don't care anymore, now all of a sudden it's an emergency and you need to find a job, and you're just going to find something that you don't want to do again. So you might as well look now. And since you're making money anyways, keep your head down, find what you want to do with the rest of your life, or at least for the next, I recommend staying at jobs for at least 3 years minimum.
It builds a good record.
Yeah, it looks good on your resume. You can hop around to different companies that maybe do the same thing to get those pay raises like they talk about. But just be prepared if you're going to commit to something that you should probably stay for at least 3 years.
Well, because like you said, if it becomes an emergent scenario where you have to get something, I mean, you've not only have the stress of the job that you had, that may be gone now, but you've now compiled all the other stresses that you have to go along with that of like things that have to happen because life goes on, and you are now scrambling to try to find work. Just always like to encourage people, like there are resources out there, your local, like here in Michigan, we have Michigan Works. They can help connect people with it. There, as of right now, with the way the country is and like things going on, there are plenty of places out there looking to hire employees. It seems like everywhere you go, nobody can find enough employees. So there are options out there for people if you're looking.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just, if you feel like you're at a point where the stress is getting overwhelming and it's affecting your health, definitely talk to somebody, talk to friends, talk to family. You can feel free to reach out to us if you want to talk as well. We're more than happy to talk with you. It's just, we don't want it to get to the point where you're at that level where you're about to break. We want to get you if you're at that point. And it's just
first responders, military, we got it all here, man. We've all done it. So medical field, I mean, we get the stresses that you guys are enduring every day, especially with how crazy COVID was for 2 years there. So
that can't be underplayed how much that affected people and is still affecting people today. And now, I mean, I know personally that they have gotten what's now called long COVID, where they're dealing with extended symptoms for up to 6 months, possibly even longer. I haven't looked too much into it, I'll be honest. But yeah, reaching out to people, like finding whether it's a therapist, psychologist, psychiatrist on your own through your own private and health insurance. A lot of companies have what is called employee assistance programs. A lot of that's been mandated, or a lot of companies have put that into place. I don't like to fully rely on that because, like they made a point earlier, you may want to find somebody that does specialize more in your type of field with the issue that you're dealing with. Like if you're dealing with stresses from a job because you work in a high stress burnout type of healthcare, first responder, whether you've been in the military, like finding people that have some of those similar backgrounds really will help open that up. I know it's hard to talk to people that maybe don't get it, haven't experienced that, because in the back of your mind, you're like, well, how can you understand what I'm going through because you haven't lived through this? But I will say some help is better than no help. So that's definitely important too. I mean, me personally, I'll just share it. I ended up reaching out to somebody through our employee assistance program. We had a major incident that went down with a critical incident that went down, and it was a pretty high stress. It involved a lot of law enforcement, thinking that who's in what type of danger where, and having to essentially sit there and dispatch the whole thing and watch it unfold. Even if you're not there, you underestimate how much something like that can impact you. You don't have to be right up in front of the thick of it for it to hit you. So for me, it was more of just a lack of being able to decompress and de-stress. Like for me, I had to go back to work for the next 3 days. So my body didn't have enough time to sit there and decompress. I was sitting in the office like a day or two later, and for like 10 minutes where there was nothing going on, totally zoned out because I like couldn't engage. I was getting super irritable with people. like snapping at people that I never snapped at before. And I'm like, I have no idea what's going on right now. I'm like, I gotta go talk to somebody. And so it was through that employee assistance program. It was like 5 sessions, I think is what they covered typically, at least in my workplace. It was funny because the lady actually who they hooked me up with used to work with my dad. So like it was like a telemedicine visit. But it's important to do that because yeah, maybe I'm not dealing with something as super, maybe I'm not currently dealing with it anymore, but maybe I didn't deal with it as severe as some people. But like you underestimate how much critical incident stress can impact you and how much it takes to actually decompress from that. So just getting off that topic, last word of encouragement, please don't let it get to that point or bottle up or just think that it's cool, it won't affect me. It's probably going to affect you more than you realize.
Yeah, it's not a problem until it is, isn't it? It's like for a lot of people it's that way. So definitely take Spice's advice, take our advice, talk to somebody. We're not mental health professionals, but we've been in those stressful situations. We understand how it is, and it doesn't even have to be something, you know, related to medical field. It could just be normal everyday stress that builds up over time. You know, if you're a single provider for a family, it can be stressful. If you're a single person trying to survive in this world, a young person trying to survive in this world, it can be very stressful. So if you have friends, talk to them. They'll be more than happy to talk to you about it. I know for guys especially, it's very difficult for us to kind of put our problems on other people and try to talk to other people about our problems. And that's something I deal with on a day-to-day basis, even when it comes to talking to my wife about stuff. So it's just take the time to talk to other people and just know that there's people that are willing to listen to you out there.
Yeah, that's important. I mean, like you said, this is not medical advice. We don't give out legal advice either. Make sure you seek help from like these like professionals in the
or
area.
Financial advice.
Or financial advice. I mean, Raj is closer than the rest of us, but like, so yeah, we're not medical professionals, legal professionals. Like, we don't give out those kinds of advice. So just take this as like friendly person to person peer advice. Go seek help or talk to the actual professionals that can give you those types of advice.
That's all the time we have. Anyone have anything else they want to say?
No, for not having a set topic, I'd say that was a pretty fruitful discussion.
I know, and Raj was judging us. He was like, "Oh, what are we going to talk about?" It's like, bro, you don't think we can talk for 2 hours? We can talk for 2 hours.
No, we can talk for 2 hours. It's just
in case our listeners have not realized we are a bunch of jabberjaws.
All right. We had 800 downloads today. Almost 1,000. That's with 14 episodes, and we started end of July, so all of August, all of September, all of October. So 3 months, 14 episodes, almost 1,000 downloads. Not too shabby, if I do say so myself.
No, more than we expected.
Yeah, and that's thanks to all of our listeners. So we appreciate all of you, as we always say. And, you know, like always, make sure you are getting us out there to everyone that you can. Tell your friends, your family, people you like, people you don't like. We don't care. We'll talk to them. And, you know, the more people that listen to us, the more clout that we get, the more interesting things that we will be able to do for the show. So thank you very much for all of your support. And I think that's it. Look out for the Drunk with Questions holiday special coming out in a couple weeks here. And we will see you guys in season 2. So for the rest of the holidays and the start of the new year, stay ordinary, my friends.
As always, everyone, thank you so much for listening to this episode of Drunk with Questions.
Drunk with Questions wouldn't be possible without incredibly ordinary individuals such as yourselves. Make sure you join the Drunk with Questions crew every Sunday on your preferred podcast streaming website. Don't forget to like, follow, comment, and subscribe on all of our social media pages. And feel free to reach out to us by email at any time.